Good afternoon, and thank you again for your patience. My name is Kim Armstead, and I'm one of the public information officers with the Oakland Police Department. Today, Oakland Police Chief LeRonne Armstrong will be discussing and providing an update to the violence that erupted citywide over this past weekend. Joining the chief is Deputy Chief Lindsay, who oversees Bureau of Investigations, Deputy Chief Bolton, who oversees the Bureau of Field Operations, 1, Captain Figueroa with our Criminal Investigations Division, Lieutenant Chavis, who oversees the Homicide Section. All questions should be held till the end of the briefing, and the chief will answer them at that time. Thank you. I'll now introduce the chief.
Good afternoon. I want to start today like I start every press conference. We have 124 homicides in the city of Oakland. So in recognition of 124 homicides, we will take a pause for 124 seconds to recognize the lives lost in the city of Oakland. Thank you. So I want to take today and talk about the impact of what we've seen across our city over the last 48 hours since Friday. And I must say what we've seen in Oakland is not much different than a lot of cities have seen in this Northern California region. I'll talk today about some of the shootings, some of the homicides, as well as the roving robbery caravans that we've seen across our city that's also impacted other cities. Let me first start off with Friday, November 19th, 2021. Our department encountered roving caravans of hundreds of vehicles targeting cannabis operations locations, several throughout the city of Oakland. As officers were approaching these vehicles to take action, we encountered over 175 rounds being fired, which made us stand at a safe distance. But we recognized in that moment that serious gunfire was being used during the midst of these attempted burglaries and robberies. We also seen an additional 200 additional vehicles involved in sideshow activity. That activity continued until the late morning, impacting communities throughout the city of Oakland, primarily in East Oakland, deep East Oakland, where I've gotten calls from community members about people spinning donuts until the 2 to 3 hour in the morning, where community members were disturbed. I had a chance on Saturday to go out to Ira Jenkins Park on Eads, where a senior who lives in a senior citizen's home or around the park, said that she was up to 4 in the morning because there were donuts being spent and she could hear them all night. So impacted our whole East Oakland and all of our residents in the area. But Saturday, over a 10-hour period, we really seen things erupt. Just over 10 hours, nearly 24 incidents occurred, most of which we are continuing to investigate. It started just before 3 p.m. when we were responding to a call of an armed carjacking and robbery that occurred in the 2600 block of Fisher Avenue. The vehicle fled prior to officers responding. Officers later located that carjacked vehicle and the suspect in the 4900 block of Clark Street. As officers attempted to contact the suspect fired multiple rounds at the officers. The suspect then retreated to that carjacked vehicle and again fled. Officers safely followed that vehicle along with our OPD helicopter. Officers continued the pursuit for the next 2 hours. That pursuit came to an end in the 5900 block of Ocean View Drive. This is where the suspect attempted to flee from OPD officers, nearly striking police vehicles as well as parked vehicles of community members. OPD emergency rescue vehicle blocked the carjacked vehicle's path. The suspect then exited the vehicle armed with the firearm. Officers gave the suspect command to drop the gun. OPD officers then discharged their duty firearms. The suspect was struck. Officers immediately began to provide emergency medical treatment for the suspect. An ambulance transported the suspect to a local hospital where he was pronounced deceased. No officers were injured. No community members were injured. Officers did recover the suspect's firearm as well as the carjacked vehicle. We are continuing our investigation of this incident. We will at some point release video that depicts this entire incident. And we also today will be releasing a photo of the actual firearm that was recovered from the suspect. But while we were continuing to investigate that officer-involved shooting, we had another shooting in the 1900 block of Foothill Boulevard. This is where officers were investigating nearly 30 rounds that were fired at that scene, striking one individual who sustained multiple gunshot wounds, and he was transported to a local hospital in critical condition. While still investigating the officer-involved shooting, as well as this attempt homicide, we were again at 8:19 p.m. called to the 3900 block of Carrington Street. As officers were approaching and arriving on scene, they located a juvenile who had been struck multiple times by gunfire. Unfortunately, he was the victim of a homicide as well and pronounced deceased on the scene. That investigation continues, and we are investigating the circumstances related to that homicide. That's homicide number 124. Just past 11 p.m., incidents continue to occur in the city of Oakland with roving caravans of vehicles targeting cannabis operations, retail shops, pharmacies throughout the city of Oakland. At least 24 businesses were impacted. Predominantly cannabis operations were burglarized, attempted burglaries, and armed individuals who were shooting as they were trying to enter these businesses whenever they were confronted by either security or people at the business. We were able to make an arrest at a couple locations. We made arrests in the 8400 block of Enterprise Way, where there were 30 suspects on scene. We made 5 arrests and recovered a firearm. We also made arrests in the 300 block of Pendleton Way, where officers were dispatched to investigate the report of an armed robbery and shooting. An exchange of gunfire ensued between the armed suspect and the armed security there guarding the business. One individual was taken into custody. The looting continued, and numerous other businesses were targeted. We continued to investigate. We continued to follow up throughout the night, throughout the city of Oakland. We extended every shift of all of our officers to make sure we had the additional resources necessary to address the violence that was occurring throughout the city. At the same time, simultaneously, we were trying to manage over 300 calls for service. At 12:45 p.m. that night, we continued to see significant increase in sideshow activity, where it had ballooned to over 500 vehicles conducting a legal sideshow in the areas of 98th and Bancroft. Shots were fired from within the sideshow crowd as we responded. We made 6 arrests, we towed 6 vehicles, and we recovered firearms. This again all occurred within a 10-hour period. This doesn't even include the additional robberies and other shootings that we had over this night. On Sunday, we had additional 6 shootings. Sunday night, we had another sideshow as well with another 300 vehicles. We were able to tow 5 vehicles that evening. And then lastly, this morning in the 8100 block of MacArthur Boulevard, officers responded to a report of another robbery in progress of a cannabis location. As they arrived at the scene, multiple vehicles fled and suspects fled. 2 of the officers in marked patrol vehicles encountered multiple gunshots. Those gunshots did not hit the officers but did strike the police vehicle. 1 arrest has been made in that burglary. We don't believe it's connected to the actual shooting though. A couple things we'll be doing moving forward, because I want to be clear that we're not going to tolerate this type of activity in the city of Oakland. We are going to respond. So what we'll be doing to make sure that this upcoming weekend we can address these roving gangs that have targeted so many communities is that we will have tactical teams deployed throughout the city. These individuals that come to the city have been heavily armed from all throughout the Bay Area. These are not just people from Oakland. They are groups of people coming to target communities. We will be prepared to address it. We'll have extended staffing over the weekend to ensure that there is enough resources to address the violent crime. One of my asks in particular is I need city's help. I need help from the leaders of this city that amidst 124 homicides, there hasn't been one call for an emergency meeting to discuss gun violence in the city of Oakland. I'm asking council members to step up and start having a conversation about the loss of life in this city. Beyond the politics of whether you support police or not, there is a clear problem in this city, that this city had to deal with overwhelming violence in this community over the weekend, and it's unacceptable. It's unacceptable for our residents. It's unacceptable for our visitors. Nobody should have to live through this. I'm asking council to step up and have a conversation about how they can support our effort to address public safety in this city. I'm also saying that it doesn't need to be more police. Every city agency in Oakland should be focused around violent crime. I don't care if you drive a public works truck. I don't care if you pick up litter. Everybody has to be invested in making this community safer. We can't do it alone. And even if we were given resources, we couldn't get those resources in uniform anytime within the next 18 months. We need help now. And I think all of the city resources have to be gathered in order to address violence in a holistic way. I appreciate the work that we're doing with the Department of Violence Prevention, which has been responsive and been coming out to scenes to assist us as best they can. I also want to give an update on the retired Captain Urshi Joyner investigation. We have arrested 3 suspects in connection with the incident. 1 of the suspects was arrested in Houston, Texas, and 2 were arrested in Elk Grove. I can't release the names today, but that will be released after the arraignment. We appreciate all the hard work that went into this investigation, as well as all the information that was brought to us by community members as we've called for help from our community. I must say, throughout the weekend, the residents of Oakland have been super supportive. They have been sending us video, helping us address violence, helping us identify these cars involved in this violence, helping us identify people involved in this violence. So I continue to call for that help as we continue to do our best to make this city safe. And we're going to do everything we can to make sure this is a safe upcoming weekend. With that, I'll take any questions. Yeah.
Are you even able to cover your city? Do you have your sectors covered? I have some information that maybe you can't even staff every sector.
Yeah, we had some trouble this weekend because officers took vacation and other things, so we had to move resources around, but we had the whole city covered. We also extended the shifts of officers that were working a couple extra hours to cover the high level of violence. I want to say, too, that we have some of our local groups and gangs that are really driving some of this violence. We know that some of the arrests that we made were connected to our groups and gangs. Our case gang in the city of Oakland, they are the highest focus of ours in our ceasefire strategy, we will be conducting enforcement efforts. This group has really been causing havoc throughout this city, and now we will leverage every resource. I've made calls this morning to our federal partners to bring them in to assess and see how they can support us in our efforts. But enforcement action will be coming consistent with our ceasefire message, that they continue to pick up guns, and so enforcement is afoot.
I'm sorry, you said this was a local group? I know you've mentioned some people coming from out of town, but you're saying it's the local groups that are really driving this?
On a consistent basis, especially related to our shootings and homicides in the city of Oakland, and even involved in some of the incidents that we saw this weekend. But this weekend's events weren't just Oakland groups, although we do believe they were involved. We did see people from outside of Oakland and the surrounding counties that were here as well, driving violence as well. And I don't think that this is just an Oakland problem. I think whether San Francisco's issues or issues that happen in Walnut Creek and other cities, we all have been impacted with these groups of individuals that are coming, targeting communities and committing these violent crimes. The thing that we are not used to is these groups' willingness to actually use firearms and shoot at people and threaten people with guns and run into businesses armed with firearms, challenging security guards, armed security, and having shootouts with security guards. It's just at an intolerable level.
Is this, Chief, a situation where you might have to bring in the National Guard? Like you said, it's not just Oakland, it's Walnut Creek and other cities, and Palo Alto might be next. I think it already was. How are you already working with other cities, and is it a National Guard situation?
I don't believe it's a National Guard situation. We have been working with other agencies. We had a regional call today at 12:30 today to speak to local agencies about a response. I've made a call to those agencies that we put together a regional task force that we will be willing to participate in so that we can again address this issue throughout not just Oakland but the Bay Area. But we know Oakland is going to be impacted, and so we want to make sure that we get the support of not only our local agencies but also our state agencies. So we will be asking for the help of CHP as well.
Are you worried, Chief, excuse me, are you worried as the holidays approach, since in general historically, especially property crimes tend to increase during the holiday season? Are you concerned about that, and are you planning ahead for any enforcement?
Yeah, so we are, I won't say worried, we are preparing. Traditionally, like you said, we do see crime spike in the latter months during the holiday season. We just met this morning to talk about the resources that we'll be dedicating to address our holiday spike. So it will start this weekend. It will start this weekend with additional staffing on patrol. Some of our specialized units will be on mandatory overtime patrols. So we're going to leverage all of our auxiliary units to come out and support our patrol units. We also will support patrol with additional overtime if available as well.
And Chief, do you have evidence that the coordinated mass retail theft was connected to what was going on in other cities, whether it was the same groups involved? And I'll tack on another question, how many officers were involved in firing shots at the car-jacking suspect who died, and are they still on active duty right now while it's being investigated?
We do have intelligence that it is a collective group of people, multiple groups that are coming together to commit these burglary acts or attempted burglaries or looting of locations. We know that it is a very coordinated effort through the use of social media apps and other ways in which they're making contact with each other and then seizing on locations. So yes, we are. And it was 2 officers were involved in that shooting, that officer involved shooting.
Are they still on active duty right now, or what's the status?
They are aligned with policy. They are now on their mandatory paid leave, paid administrative leave.
What do you attribute this rise in violence and this brazenness of these criminals to use firearms in these robberies?
Well, I mean, we have seen this escalating over time. And many times I've come before you and told you that gun violence was continuing to increase and people were getting emboldened. I think it is a justice system question. I think they have learned over the pandemic year that they haven't been held in custody for the possession of firearms and the use of firearms. So I do think it's a criminal justice failure in that way because we haven't held very dangerous people in custody for very long. So now it's not intimidating to come out and drive with a firearm. It's not intimidating for them to use those firearms because there's not much accountability right now. So we are calling on help from the district attorney as well as our local judges. And I have asked for the county, the Alameda County District Attorney's Office to help us in charging those that are identified as being involved in these incidents.
And what has their response been, or have they given you a response yet?
We do have a response. We have a dedicated district attorney on the ground with us at the department that will help us during these investigations.
Chief, the police union said that 11 out of 35 beats weren't covered this weekend. Is that accurate? And do you typically not cover on the beats? And is that important?
We did have one night where we had 11 open beats. I immediately reached out to Deputy Chief Bolton and we moved resources throughout the city to cover those beats, as well as extended shifts of the prior shift to make sure that those beats were covered. I just think for us this weekend, our main problem was that we were inundated by so many issues of violence throughout our city. That impacted our staffing because we had our patrol officers taken off the beat to help out with all of these very violent scenes.
You mentioned,
Go ahead.
Do you feel like the ages of the people committing these crimes is, you know, it seems like they're getting younger and younger too, right? Do you feel like the ages of the suspects that are participating in these criminal acts are you know, juveniles?
Yeah, we definitely have seen an uptick in juvenile crime, particularly violent crime. We've seen several more armed juveniles than we've seen over the last couple of years. So that has been an issue for us that we've been trying to address with the Alameda County District Attorney's Office as well as the county courts. That is a huge problem that we're having a challenge with, is keeping juveniles in custody when they are arrested armed with firearms or committing very violent offenses.
You mentioned multiple incidents at cannabis dispensaries this weekend. Is there anything you're doing to help those people in that industry, or anything you're warning them that they should be doing?
Yeah, we actually have a meeting with cannabis owners set for Wednesday, and we'll be discussing security concerns at their particular locations. There'll be a couple of clear asks to our cannabis owners to fortify their locations as best they can. And I do think that that was a deterrent at certain locations, and it actually prevented people from actually entering those locations because locations that were well secured did not actually get victimized, but those that were not as well secured, they were victims, unfortunately. So I will recommend that to them, as well as recommending that they have private security as well. We've seen several of those businesses have private security, and I think that was a help and a deterrent. But I just want to be clear. I do not want to see security companies engaged in gunfire with individuals. I don't want to see these gun battles that are occurring as a result of armed suspects coming to these locations. We will be out there to support them. We obviously expect people to protect their business and protect lives, but we don't want to open door to have firearms being shot by both the security as well as the robbers.
We have time for one last question. There is one.
Chief, can you say anything about the Earthy Joyner situation? How did authorities get to make those arrests in the Sacramento area and Houston? Can you go into any other details?
I'll say that it was an effort, a collective effort between our department, our investigative units, but also other agencies that assisted us in this investigation. I think it was a collective effort of hard work and additional follow-up. Again, like I said, we asked for community to bring forth information that helped us solve this case. Community was very helpful in helping us identify certain things within this investigation, and those things I think we followed up on, and they led to what we believe is a very strong case.
Chief, just one final question.
Oh, thank you. Hi, Chief Armstrong.
Hello.
I was wondering your position on ceasefire versus enforcement now that the violence has erupted like it has.
Yeah.
Any change in the strategy in terms of using ceasefire and making arrests?
Well, one of the components of ceasefire is that if when you give a group the message about putting guns down and not engaging in violence, the most important part of ceasefire is that you actually carry out your message. And the message that we have for those that we even invited to our call-in last Thursday was to put down the guns, and it didn't cease. So enforcement efforts is the proper lever to pull for the ceasefire strategy, and that's what we're doing now. I think it's important that we carry through on what we told them. We said that if you pick up guns and use them in our community, that we were going to levy enforcement actions. We will. We are. You will see a presence on the streets. You will see us taking more enforcement action to address those that are carrying guns and using those guns in our community. All right. And lastly, if there's any individual things, any additional follow-up you like, our investigative team is here, both Deputy Chief Lindsay as well as Captain Figueroa and Lieutenant Shavies, if there's any specifics about a case you would like to follow up on. With that, thank you all.